All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian with you guys. I fear we're gonna have a phenomenal show today. That's my fear. A little bit later, dramatic news about the pledge. Dramatic news. In the third hour, Ro Khanna is gonna join us. Great interview. I already did it earlier today. I want you guys to check it out. So, some drums between progressive legislators and Democratic leadership.
Really? Wow, what a surprise.
No, it is a surprise because usually progressives just sit back and take it.
Right.
And now AOC and Ro Khanna are beginning to say, nah, I'm tired of it.
I love it.
So there's some fire in there. So make sure you check that out. Speaking of fire, a lot of drama around Elizabeth Warren and whether the corporate Democrats are now rallying to her side. More drama in my CNN appearance last night. We're gonna do something unusual. Instead of saying, hey, nice job, Cenk, we're actually gonna criticize me. Okay, so that'll be interesting. That's a little bit later in the program.
That's my favorite thing to do.
I'm
kidding.
You're not surprised. Not surprised. Okay, anyway. So by the way, tomorrow's gonna be so much fun. Stay with us the whole day tomorrow on tyt.com as we do the fantastic Friday for Aspiration. There's sumo wrestling. I don't know how in the world you're gonna compete with me in sumo wrestling. Okay.
I don't even know what that means.
Okay, then we put on the sumo outfits, or maybe you put one on and I already have one.
I'm supposed to try to beat you up? Is that what's happening?
You're supposed to try to knock me over.
This might be fun.
Okay, and then there's a dunk tank, etc. So don't miss any part of tomorrow, tyt.com. Okay, so, but first, war.
Yeah, okay, yeah, we start off with some scary news, but there's a little bit of a silver lining, which I did not expect, so.
An orange lining, if you will.
An orange lining, yeah.
Oh!
Early this morning, it was reported that Iran had shot down a US military surveillance drone. Now, there were, of course, different stories depending on who you were getting the perspective from. The US military argued that the drone was shot down on international airspace. However, Iran has come out and said, no, the surveillance drone actually entered our airspace and it was a sign of provocation and we shot it down as a result. Now, given the way John Bolton and Mike Pompeo have been pushing for war, and given the flimsy evidence they've provided in regard to the Japanese oil tanker that was targeted, some are really questioning whether the US government is telling the truth here or if they're just pushing for war or trying to rally support for the war. And one of the people who's actually downplaying this whole attack is Donald Trump. And we're gonna get to his comments in just a second. But first, I wanna go to a statement by the top general in Iran. Here is what he had to say.
We have no intention to fight with any countries, but we are completely ready for war. What happened today was an obvious sign of this accurate message.
So that was General Hussein Salami, that is his name. And he is saying, look, we're not looking for war, but this is an act of provocation and we're gonna protect ourselves. It is the same thing that we would do here in the United States if a drone, a surveillance drone from an adversary entered our airspace.
So here's my analysis of what happened. I think unfortunately the Iranians are telling the truth again and we are lying again. Now there's a very notable exception here of Donald Trump. So we're gonna get to that in a second. He's not telling the truth either, but that's a good thing, I'll explain. But the US says, it was over international waters. The Iranians are like, we have video of the downed drone in our waters. So now they could be making that up. Did I see the video and do I know where exactly Iranians' international waters are? Did I confirm that within the last 24 hours? No, okay, so that's why I'm telling you it's my analysis, okay? But based on what has happened so far in the context of all of this, I would be very surprised if Mike Pompeo and John Bolton were telling the truth. They haven't told the truth in any of this so far. And could they have sent in the drone into Iranian territory on purpose to get it shot down so they could then turn around to Donald Trump and go, hey, Mr. Trump, I know you don't want to get involved in the war in the Middle East, but they shot down our drone, what could we do? But it turns out that plan was foiled by Donald Trump. That is a twist nobody saw coming. Well, you partly didn't see it coming. We actually started alluding to it over the last couple of days here on the Young Turks, that he might make that turn. And that some of the people who are I don't want to use the word heroes. I don't want to Biden this, but on the other hand, who really did something great here are Tucker Carlson and Matt Gaetz, two guys I am not prone to give compliments to. But they are working to make sure we do not get into a war with Iran, and Trump does listen to that.
You're absolutely right. Trump also listens to his base, and invading another country is not popular with his base. So you have people on the right, voters, and you have these talking heads on Fox who, luckily in this case, are pushing for the right thing, which is avoiding the war in Iran. And I just wanna quickly mention that over and over again, we see that the White House can't get its story straight when it comes to Iran. So they're trying to rally support for this war, but they keep making all of these ridiculous mistakes. This is a small mistake, but it just, again, shows you that they are not getting their story right. So for instance, Iran added that the downed drone was a US-made RQ-4A Global Hawk spying drone. A US official previously identified to CNN the model of the drone was MQ-4C Trishan, but US Central Command later said that it was what Iran said it was. So that just stands out to me because you have the US government right now pushing toward a war in Iran, and they still can't get their story straight. I mean, they're sloppy and messy beyond belief, which is why a lot of people are questioning the evidence that we're seeing from the Trump administration. But with that said, it does appear that Trump is going in the right direction for now. And I want to show you this video where he really downplays this whole drone issue. Take a look.
I would imagine it was a general or somebody that made a mistake in shooting that drone down. And fortunately, that drone was unarmed. It was not, there was no man in it, and there was no, it was over international waters, clearly over international waters, but we didn't have a man or woman in the drone. We had nobody in the drone.
Are you still open?
It would have made a big difference, let me tell you. Would have made a big, big difference. But I have a feeling, I may be wrong and I may be right, but I'm right a lot. I have a feeling that it was a mistake made by somebody that shouldn't have been doing what they did.
Who do you think did
I think they made a mistake.
Okay, even when we want to agree with him, he makes it really hard.
I'm right a lot.
Yeah, I might be wrong or I might be right, but I'm right a lot. Okay, almost never. And in this case, you're right on the substance of the policy, but unfortunately, he's not telling the truth, but that's okay, I'll take it. So what's he not telling the truth about? He says Iran probably made a mistake. No, Iran, when they are wrongly accused, comes out and says, no, we didn't hit the tanker. That's crazy talk. We didn't do that at all. In this case, they're like, yeah, no, we hit the drone. It was us. We hit it. It was not a mistake. That's because it was in our territory. Okay. And then Trump also, I don't think, told the truth when he said it was in international waters. So, but nonetheless, I don't care about any of that in this context because Trump is trying to find a reason not to escalate the conflict. Wonderful, terrific. I'm happy to give him credit there. So why do we even, so people say, as always, with any claims of bias, etc., why don't we like Donald Trump? Because of what he does, right? If he does things that are positive, like getting us out of a war with Iran, great, then I like that part. There's nothing wrong with that. And so here there's actually one more set of people that are on the right side of this, and of course another guy who's on the wrong side. The guy on the wrong side is Netanyahu, unsurprising, the Dick Cheney of Israel, and he's dying for a war, and he's been trying to agitate for that war all along. And he says Iran has intensified its aggression against the United States and the international community. Israel has assassinated scientists inside of Iran, but that doesn't count as aggression. You know, another word for assassination is murder. One of the scientists they killed in front of his kid's preschool.
Jeez.
Okay, but that apparently is not aggression. But if Iran shoots down a drone in their territory, that apparently is aggression for Dick Cheney / Netanyahu, okay? So that's Netanyahu, that's not surprising. Now, this is slightly surprising. The Pentagon is saying, not a good idea. So when Trump is asking around, Bolton and Pompeo are like, come on, let's just go to war. We want war so bad. You know that they even looked at you kind of weird. I think that they might have, yeah, you know, they winked at you the wrong way.
They're like these terrible high school instigators, like looking for conflict, except in this case, they're thinking about money. They're thinking about the money that can be made through this conflict.
That's right, defense contractors, oil companies, etc. So now, then Trump asked the Pentagon. The Pentagon's like, look, there's a couple of problems here. Number one, if you really want to get rid of Iran's nuclear program, if they start building it back up, Now, we had already gotten rid of it. That was the Obama deal, but you tore that up. Okay, so that's unfortunate. Anyway, but if you want to get rid of it, if they start building it back up, it's like the only real way to do that is regime change. And they're like, and they have warned Trump, that is a massive undertaking. Do not underestimate that. So if that reporting is true about what the Pentagon said, wonderful, because that is accurate. Then apparently there was a request for guidance on what if we did one strike, like, oh, we'll show them, such a neoconservative John Bolton thing.
And that is what Senator Lindsey Graham is pushing for, by the way.
Yes. And so they're saying, oh, we'll teach them a lesson. We'll put some points on the board, as Lindsey Graham says, right? So the Pentagon was like, no. Think about it. If we do a strike, you're assuming that they won't strike back, but almost certainly they will. Then we will have to counterstrike, and then we have escalated the conflict in a way that draws us into that giant war. And then you do anything you like, man. Our job is to give you military advice. But all these roads lead to an enormous war in the Middle East.
So just recently, there was a bipartisan congressional leadership briefing at the White House. And Chuck Schumer came out of that briefing and mentioned that he wants to ensure that the Trump administration doesn't push for war or invade Iran unilaterally. There's still a lot of concern that they'll cite that 2001 Afghanistan-related measure as a way of, or an excuse to bypass Congress and invade unilaterally. So there's that worry. But there's also, just going back to what Trump said in that first video that we showed you, he really emphasized, it's a drone, there wasn't anyone in it. You know what I'm saying? Because he wants to appear strong. Like, he cares about appearing strong. And I know that he probably has some worry about appearing weak if he doesn't act on what just happened. But I like the fact that he's emphasizing there wasn't a person in there, this was an accident. Like, that's a good sign, right? Yes. It really shows that he's looking for any way to avoid actually engaging in a war. And then I thought that this next clip was also telling. Again, this is Trump, take a look.
I don't know, I find it hard to believe it was intentional, if you want to know the truth. I think that it could have been somebody who was loose and stupid that did it. But we'll be able to report back and you'll understand exactly what happened. But it was a very foolish move. That I can tell you.
Do you feel like there are members of your administration who are trying to push you into conflict?
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, in many cases, it's the opposite. But I will say, look, I said, I want to get out of these endless wars. I campaigned on that. I want to get out. We've been in Afghanistan for 19 years. As you know, we've reduced very substantially in Afghanistan. We beat the caliphate. We took back 100% of the caliphate. When it was 99%, Justin, I said, we're going to get out. We're going to start peeling back. And everybody went crazy because it was 99. So I said, all right, so we'll finish it up. So we got 100%. And we're pulling that back out of Syria. We're pulling a lot of people back.
So he likes taking ownership for bringing American troops back, for no longer getting involved in these interventionist wars. He likes to take credit for that, so that's good. One other thing though is, remember, Trump doesn't want to appear weak. That applies to national security, but that certainly also applies to his own administration. So I'm sure reporters asking him about members of his administration pushing him in a certain direction doesn't sit well with him.
So that's why I gave Tucker Carlson credit the other night, because apparently they're having conversations with Tucker's telling him, be careful, Bolton and Pompeo are trying to trick you. Now, you notice I mentioned Matt Gaetz earlier. He's working with Ro Khanna, arguably the most progressive congressperson in the House, and saying, no, you cannot do this war without getting authorization from Congress. And Matt Gaetz, arguably the most conservative member of the House. So this is an interesting ideological union between the right wing and the left wing against the establishment and the neoconservatives. Now that is bipartisanship that I love, as opposed to the bipartisanship in the so-called middle of Washington, where the right-wing corporate Republicans and the so-called left-wing corporate Democrats agree to rob us on behalf of their donors. That's what the media normally celebrates. That's what we can't stand. This is actual real bipartisanship. Ro Khanna is on the show. He talked about that. You can get that at tyt.com. All of our interviews are under the conversation. Make sure you check that out. And so it is strange bedfellows, and we do live in a topsy-turvy world where here the Young Turks is agreeing with Donald Trump against the rest of the Trump administration.
We got to take a break. When we come back, we have some interesting news about the pledge that we're asking Democratic candidates to sign. And we also have an incredible story about what the establishment is doing in promoting Elizabeth Warren.
We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment. All right, back on the Young Turks. Nicholas Ward writes in from the member section, Cenk, my only critique is that you aren't strong enough. More strength, please. Wow. So now we are going to critique me for being a little too strong last night on CNN, but I appreciate your input. But watch the segment first, and we'll make a decision. Chelsea writes in, just finished the Juneteenth special from yesterday. This show has been instrumental in prompting me to search up so many topics. From Hawaii, we don't recognize Juneteenth, so I really learned a lot. Look, a lot of people are saying some wonderful things about the Juneteenth special from yesterday, and I love that David West changed his flight plans and stayed an extra day to join us on that. He's an NBA legend, as well as all other hosts that we have here. So look, check out the whole thing. Members get all of our shows anytime they want. tyt.com/trial. You can try it for a week free, and so we appreciate you guys checking that out. We hope that it was interesting and educational. All right, last one's from Twitter. The Stone Buddha says, it took all of Cenk's power not to make a childish comment about General Salami. You could see it on his face.
I know, I was actually pretty disappointed.
No, come on guys, that's a lot of baloney.
It's too late. No, I'm glad you did it. I feel like I was a little too lowbrow by mentioning salami. But come on, his last name's Salami.
I know, it's okay.
Yeah, I like salami.
It's from a different culture. We're both from different cultures.
I do like salami. Okay. Anyway.
Oh yeah, are you kidding me? I love a salami sandwich. Yeah. Anyway, so now that the childishness is over, back to you, Anna.
Actually, kind of back to you, but I'll start this off.
Wait. Oh, I thought you were going to do some stuff. No, are you ready for the pledge?
Oh, I do have some stuff. Let me do some stuff first. Okay. You're right. Some housekeeping. All right, so on Friday, we are having a super fun, fantastic promotional event, and it's all because of our wonderful partner at Aspiration. As I've talked about on the show multiple times, Aspiration is a wonderful financial institution that makes sure to invest your money in an ethical way, and they pay you a 2% interest rate on your savings account. Please check them out at aspiration.com/TYT, and then stay tuned for our fantastic Friday show where we're gonna do all sorts of shenanigans, including sumo wrestling.
Apparently, yes. Guys, I did an interview today. It's up on Forbes now. You can check it out on Twitter about how we're doing something crazy that no one else has ever done. We're rejecting a lot of advertisers and saying, no, we don't want your money. Okay, they try to give it to us. No, sorry, we don't want it. We don't want it. Okay, and they say, oh yeah, well, what's a brand you'll work with? And I said, Aspiration, because you know what they create? They create aspiration.com/TYT. Win-wins.
They do. They do.
You get to have peace of mind. Your money's in a progressive place that they don't put it in dirty places, and it's a financial win. So
yes.
Anyway, that's why we chose them as a partner.
And our special programming will begin Friday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. So check us out, tyt.com/live, to enjoy the extra content.
Yes, so starting earlier tomorrow, so check it out all day long. Okay, so now let's get going. Now, some of you have been wondering. There's some folks who have not signed the Progressive Pledge. Now, a lot of the great progressive congresspeople have. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has signed it. Ro Khanna has signed it. Jamie Raskin signed it. And then in the presidential candidates, we've had three, and we had three on the first day: Bernie Sanders, Marianne Williamson, and Mike Gravel. But you guys kept asking, wait, why hasn't Elizabeth Warren signed the pledge? It's got the 5 pillars that most progressives agree to, and that's why the pledge exists in the first place. Do you agree to it or don't you agree to it? So Green New Deal, Medicare for all, higher wages, ending the corruption through an amendment, and college for all. Well, I have news for you guys. Elizabeth Warren has signed the pledge.
Very nice.
So look, it's not a big surprise.
I was a little worried though. I was. I'm gonna keep it real. But maybe she wanted to sit down, take the time to really like investigate it and ensure that she did her research before signing something, which I appreciate, but it had me worried.
Yeah, and look, she does policy. So she looked at the policies and she's like, yeah, those are the things I'm going for. Now look, some corporate Democrats, if you can call them that, are now beginning to think like, oh, maybe she won't do them, and maybe that's why we like her. Well, sorry, she just said she will do them. So, and look, part of the pledge is getting people clarity to see what they're in favor of and what they're not. So you can go to tyt.com/pledge and read it for yourself. And so now the two biggest progressive candidates in the country have signed the pledge. And by the way, they're polling at number 2 and number 3. So they're both in the top 3 of presidential candidates. There's an excellent chance that one of them is going to be the next president of the United States of America. And they both agree that those are the 5 pillars that stand for what progressivism is, and that they are happy to make sure that they fight for those things. And the pledge doesn't just say I support them or I agree with them. It says I will fight to make sure that these things become the law of the land. So it's wonderful news that Elizabeth Warren has also signed it. Obviously, we'll continue to follow up and track the other candidates. But as I talked to Ro Khanna today, I think, and he called for this too, as one of the leading progressives in Congress, we got to get active in beginning to put pressure on politicians in Washington today. So once we clarify who agrees with this pledge and who doesn't on the presidential level. And by the way, we're going to Miami for the debates on June 26th and 27th. Both Anna and I will go, and so will Emma Vigeland. So we'll have all of our cast there, and we're asking you guys to come. Some of the presidential candidates are going to come and talk to you if you're in Miami. We're obviously going to talk to you. We're going to meet everyone that comes to Miami. And so this pressure is definitely working. Let's keep going. But once we've clarified the presidential candidates, right now, nobody is fighting for a $15 minimum wage that Democratic leadership, including Nancy Pelosi, said they would vote on within the first 100 hours if the Democrats got the House. They haven't voted on it at all. And it doesn't look like Nancy Pelosi's ever gonna introduce it. She says she doesn't want to do impeachment because she's too busy doing other things. What other things? So we can then hold them accountable. Look, the reason we call it TYT Army is because Barack Obama said, make me do it. And so this is an army of democracy, okay? So we are civil, we are polite. You saw it in all the videos in Iowa, we emphasize that over and over again. But we do show up in force because we need people to understand that there are a lot of us. The media often misrepresents what's going on and makes it seem like progressives are the fringe. If you saw my speech in Iowa, which you can check out on tyt.com, you see that I read about at least a dozen polls that show you that Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and all of us are not in the minority. The overwhelming majority of the country agrees with us, let alone the overwhelming majority of Democrats. But when you show up in person as you did in Iowa, it finally makes it visual for the press and they go, wow, I didn't know that many people agreed with it. Look at the polls. And you showing up in person makes all the difference. If you're gonna do that in Miami, tyt.com/rally. And by the way, go sign the pledge. Now over 22,000 people have signed it. So those are all people saying, hey, I'm a voter. And if you're for this, you can get my vote. If you're not, bless your heart, but I'm gonna vote for someone else that did sign the pledge. So do that at tyt.com/pledge. If we get it to a larger and larger number, I think there'll be a world of pressure for not just the candidates, but for the media to talk about it and say, well, the people have spoken. This is what they believe progressivism is and what their candidates should fight for.
Well, we have some more news on Elizabeth Warren, so let's do that. Centrist Democrats, notably third-way Democrats, have certainly warmed up to the idea of Elizabeth Warren as a presidential nominee. Now, this follows some scathing op-eds that were written about her previously, but it appears that they increasingly see her as an alternative to Bernie Sanders, someone who refers to himself as a democratic socialist. Elizabeth Warren, on the other hand, does not refer to herself that way. She considers herself someone who'd like to reform our capitalistic system. But they see that as a way of maybe persuading her to the center, whereas Bernie Sanders might be, or is, let's keep it real, immovable, okay? So let me give you the details. This is according to reporting from Politico. Warren is gaining traction among those who once rejected her muscular vision of liberalism. She's drawn notice for her wide-ranging "I have a plan for that" policy playbook, which has just enough growth and opportunity center-left measures to earn her a serious look from former detractors. So some of the former detractors included Third Way, right? This is a corporate-backed think tank that wrote a scathing op-ed about her back in 2013. And now all of a sudden, they're totally changing their tone on this. But before I get to what they had previously written, I just want to read this little excerpt that I came across today in Vanity Fair. And I want to ask you whether you think this is objective journalism. Quote, "The endorsements from people like Dan Gerstein, a former speechwriter to uber-centrist Joe Lieberman, reflect her growing popularity both in the crowded primary field and as an alternative choice to that old, frightening socialist boogeyman from Vermont."
No, they're neutral. They're objective. We're the biased ones for telling you what our true perspective is. We like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, and that's because they're progressives and we're progressives. Vanity Fair and all these other groups are like, no, we have no opinion at all, except for that socialist boogeyman, Bernie Sanders. No, you're not at all biased. So, look, funny enough, Dan Gerstein and I are friends, and that doesn't stop us from disagreeing. And Lieberman was not an uber-centrist. He was a right-wing, hawk, neoconservative Democrat that had no business in the Democratic Party. It's among the things Dan and I disagree on.
Right, so let me give you a little bit of from Third Way. What are they saying about Elizabeth Warren? Well, Matt Bennett, who's a co-founder for Third Way, says, one is a democratic capitalist narrative, the other is a socialist narrative. So really at the heart of this is the fear mongering about socialism. And look, if you're a corporate-backed think tank, your best interest is, of course, to look out for corporate profits. And so there's that. But previously, real quick, I want to give you what Third Way had written about Elizabeth Warren back in 2013. Nothing would be more disastrous for Democrats than to adhere to Warren's brand of economic populism.
Nothing would be more disastrous for Democrats. So 2 points about this that are very important. Number one, it's a trick. And number two, they have no idea the kind of damage they're doing Elizabeth Warren. So if they think they're helping her, they got a funny way of showing it. So first of all, on the trick. Now, some of you might remember, I told you this, I don't remember if it was a year ago or 2 years ago. I said, if Bernie Sanders starts to get momentum, the establishment will panic and go to Elizabeth Warren. If it looks like there is no serious challenger to Bernie Sanders, they'll go, yeah, Elizabeth Warren. I meant Elizabeth Warren. And I think a lot of you remember me saying that. I put it on Twitter and people were like, yeah, I remember that. So, and that is exactly what's happening here. It's also this turn now is a testament to how weak they think Joe Biden is. Because if they thought Joe Biden was gonna win, they'd be like, Elizabeth Warren, scary, disastrous, terrible, right? They'd stick with Biden, but they know Biden's going down. And then they were hoping that Kamala Harris or one of the other ones that they trust would rise, but they're not rising. They're like, wait a minute, if Biden's going down and the others are not rising, Sanders is number 2, panic. So they have already hit the panic button. And they're going, Warren, yeah, fine, Warren, no problem. We'll take Warren. But do not fall for the trick. Not to say you shouldn't vote for Elizabeth Warren. She's a wonderful progressive. And don't take Third Way's word for anything, okay? She didn't ask them to say this. And that's why they're actually doing her harm, because it makes it seem like she's a corporate Democrat. Well, she didn't ask for it. She didn't say, I'm happy to take their endorsement. She didn't say any of that stuff, right? But understand this, if they take out Bernie Sanders by pretending to support Elizabeth Warren, write it down in stone. I guarantee you that Third Way and all the other corporate Democrats and the establishment will turn on a dime and will immediately say, oh, you know what? We looked at Elizabeth Warren's policies and it turns out they are radical. It turns out they are dangerous. It turns out they are disastrous.
Yeah.
So no, not Elizabeth Warren either. So where's Kamala Harris? So where's Pete Buttigieg?
So look, I think you're right in what they're trying to do with their strategy here. I don't think that they like her economic policies, especially policies that would include, forgiving student loan debt, those types of things. However, do you think that they have a point about how malleable she could be, right? So there's the Medicare for all thing, how she said she was supportive, and then all of a sudden it appears that she's more accepting of Medicare for America, right? Or whatever it is that the centrist Democrats are trying to title it, which is essentially a public option version of the Affordable Care Act. There's also the proposal she put out in regard to the green military. I don't know if you saw that, but I have some news for you. A lot of the military is already pretty green. Like the Pentagon understands that climate change is a national security issue, and they've actually been, pretty serious about developing green programs within their department. But some people are viewing that, some progressives are viewing that as a way to funnel more money to the military.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think so at all. I think it's totally unfair to her. She's trying to get more things to be environmentally friendly, including the biggest government program of all, the military. That's not a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. That doesn't mean you do it in lieu of anything else. And look, we have our answer in a sense. Just today, she signed the Progressive Economic Pledge at tyt.com/pledge. So she reached out to us and said, yes, I'd like to sign that. That clearly says Green New Deal. And it does not say, and in fact, I double checked with them. It does not say Medicare for America. It says, I will fight for Medicare for all.
That's right.
Okay, so that is very clear. And in terms of the third ways of the world, they better be careful what they're asking for. Because look, is there a legitimate critique of Elizabeth Warren and other areas? Of course, there's also a legitimate critique of Bernie Sanders in some areas, whether it's guns in the past for Bernie Sanders or maybe some foreign policy issues that people have to sort out and get a little bit clearer positions for Elizabeth Warren, etc. Those are all fair questions, right? But she has, for a long time, been on the side of we must hold corporations accountable, we must hold banks accountable, and remember, Third Way is mainly financed by the banks. The biggest supporter probably that Elizabeth Warren has had throughout her career is PCCC, the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, okay? I don't know that they dislike any group more than they dislike Third Way. I mean, they are mortal enemies. So, and Third Way can't stand them. So for Third Way to come out and say, give a bear hug that Elizabeth Warren did not ask for to Elizabeth Warren, if they think it's being helpful, it is as usual wrong politics on their part and they're knuckleheads. Now, look, a lot of the establishment is going in that direction, and that's because they think that Elizabeth Warren won't do some of the things that she says. That's on Elizabeth Warren. She's got to prove them wrong. So I think she will do a lot of these things, and I think she partly proved it today by saying, yes, you can hold me accountable to that pledge. So we're gonna find out, obviously, but I definitely would not take Third Way's word for it. This is nothing but a trick.
So one other interesting angle to this story that I want to talk a little bit about. Third Way Democrats, and particularly the leaders of the think tank Third Way, seem to be warming up to Elizabeth Warren. And in fact, the VP and co-founder of Third Way, his name is Matt Bennett, said, quote, "The exception is Senator Bernie Sanders. We're open to everybody except for him." Now, interestingly enough, Bernie Sanders has challenged Democrats, specifically establishment Democrats, Third Way Democrats, who consistently or constantly call for unity, but then go out of their way to smear someone like Bernie Sanders. And so I want you to take a look at his challenge, and then we'll discuss what the likelihood is of this even happening. Take a look.
Absolutely, I will do everything I can to defeat Donald Trump. And if that candidate turns out to be a lot more conservative than me, somebody like a Joe Biden or somebody else, I will knock my brains out to see that he or she is elected because I want to defeat Donald Trump. So I'm asking this corporate wing of the Democratic Party, a Wall Street funded group called Third Way, if I win the nomination, are you going to be there with me or are you going to go over to Donald Trump?
We will reach out to them during the show, see if I can get you an answer.
They're not going to want to answer that because understand who Third Way is. They are funded largely by Wall Street and all corporate interests. And so they don't want Elizabeth Warren's plans in the first place, even though they're now pretending that they like her just so that they could ding up Bernie Sanders. They've been fighting against Elizabeth Warren for as long as they've existed, and she's been around. Again, as we told you earlier in the show, 2013, they wrote an article saying she'd be disastrous, right? But for them, Bernie Sanders is just absolutely unacceptable because they think Elizabeth Warren's rise might hurt Bernie Sanders. They think maybe we can get through to Elizabeth Warren. Whether they're right or wrong about that is immaterial, right? But they know with Bernie Sanders, he's a rock, and they're not gonna move that rock. And they know it for sure.
No one's been able to move that rock.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at videos on the House floor, on the Senate floor, dating decades back, and he's been fighting the same thing.
Yeah, there was some speculation earlier on as to whether The Rock was gonna run for president. Turns out he has, his name is Bernie Sanders. So now every corporation, every Wall Street banker knows you're not going to be able to persuade Bernie Sanders to screw over the average American worker on behalf of the donors. This is not going to happen. You know it, I know it, and they know it, most importantly. But these are the same guys who always screamed about unity. You have to support Joe Manchin as he deregulates the banks. When Joe Biden deregulated the banks with the Clintons, you have to support him. Unity, right?
Yep.
Now all of a sudden, we will never support Bernie Sanders. Oh, interesting. So you like those tax cuts that Trump gave you. So all that empty talk about resistance and fighting against Trump and unifying with Democrats, you never meant any of it, did you? So I love that challenge Bernie Sanders did. And my guess is they're gonna wanna hide and run because they don't wanna admit, yes, they would betray the Democratic Party. No, they never were Democrats in the first place. It was just a front group to get within the Democratic Party and corrupt it so that the Democrats would be neutered and never fight against the banks. So they don't want to give up the game, so they can't say that they would vote for Trump. And at the same time, they ain't gonna vote for Bernie Sanders. In fact, they'll turn around and probably give money against Bernie Sanders, even if it's not to Trump. What will they do? They'll find independent like Howard Schultz, and they'll bring him back up and go take votes away from the Democrats so that Trump can win. I guarantee you that's what Third Way does if Bernie Sanders is running. Hey, but they could prove us wrong. They could make a pledge right now and saying, not only will we support Bernie Sanders, we will be happy to run millions of dollars of ads in favor of Bernie Sanders and against Donald Trump. Will you say that? You know they're never gonna say that because the whole point of the group was a trick in the first place. It was a Trojan horse inside the Democratic Party.
And just keep in mind that they will go out of their way to accomplish the exact opposite of what the American public wants. So when it comes to Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax, right? Polling indicates that it's very popular. I want to go to graphic 11 real quick. Morning Consult did a survey and they found that 61% of all voters favored her 2% wealth tax on households worth at least $50 million. Among Democrats, that number of course is a little higher at 74%. So while Third Way continues to push for the tax cuts and for the favors to these Wall Street executives, the fact of the matter is the vast majority of the American public is not in favor of it. This is why Donald Trump's tax cuts for the wealthy did not poll well, even among Republicans.
Yeah, one more thing about that. As Politico wrote about it, they said at least one of Warren's lightning rod proposals is popular, referring to the one that Anna just read you. First of all, what do you mean at least one of her proposals? Almost every proposal that Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders have polls incredibly well. Now I can find you a couple that don't, so prisoners voting from inside prison might not poll that well, but Medicare for All is at 70%. The original Green New Deal poll had it at 81%. Increasing taxes on the rich polls at 82%. That's why I'm surprised this number isn't higher. I think there's something wrong with that poll. I'd imagine that taxing people above $50 million would poll even better, okay? But I love that for Politico and the establishment, that's a lightning rod. I mean, real Americans are really worried about a 2% tax on people making over $50 million. Lightning rod, what a controversial opinion. Preposterous.
All right, we gotta take a break, but when we come back, we're gonna dunk on Cenk Uygur. He was on Cuomo Primetime. And maybe you deserve a little dunking.
Oh, well, there's a lot of dunking going on. We got a dunk tank tomorrow for aspiration.com/TYT day. All right, we'll be right back.